Welcome back, everybody, to the Teen Titans Retrospective. We're going through every episode of the original series, so subscribe if you want to keep up with that. This week, Raven falls in love with a character from her book who becomes real and then tries to kill her. Oh man, it's happened to the best of us. This is Season 3, Episode 6, Spellbound, written by David Slack and directed by Alex Soto. This is a Raven-focused episode, which I'm usually a big fan of. So the Titans are fighting a villain. This guy is just called Cardiac, and it's just a giant robotic heart that attacks people, and it's maybe sentient, I'm not sure. But we get one of my favorite Robin quips, I guess, which I haven't talked about before. When the Titans first arrive, Robin has a battle cry, usually relating to some type of bad pun involving putting the villain in jail. It's usually just the only place you're going is jail.
I just love a captive audience. They may be captive now, but you're the one who's getting locked up.
This is my favorite one so far. They confront this villain named Cardiac, and Robin goes,
Cardiac, you're under arrest.
It's so stupid, but it made me laugh. I love it. Raven wants to wrap up this fight quickly because she's got a good book that she's in the middle of reading, and she wants to go home and do that instead of this. I relate. So she just tears this robotic heart thing apart, and she's like, cool, good enough, we're done here. They go back home, and Raven immediately retreats to her room to get back to reading. Unfortunately, she keeps getting interrupted by the fellow Titans, and it's fuck off, guys. Let your introvert friend be introverted for a little bit. Let her read her book. I relate maybe too much to Raven in this episode. Her friends, especially Beast Boy in this one, are particularly pushy and being hey, how come you're in your room all the time? It's cause fuck you, that's why. Beast Boy even gets mad at her and is why do you have to be so weird and creepy all the time? To his credit, he does apologize the next day, but at the same time, I don't know, let her be weird and creepy. What do you expect? You have a goth chick on your team? Let her go and let her be in her room and read books. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm getting preemptively mad for no reason. Anyways, the plot eventually happens. Raven's reading this old book about this sorcerer named Malchior. Is that right? Yep. That's what I wrote down. Who's fighting a dragon. She's reading this story about him fighting this dragon, and she's trying to, find out what happens, and keeps getting interrupted. But eventually, as she's reading, she starts to hear the voice of this sorcerer, Malchior, and we find out that his soul has been trapped inside this magic book. So Raven becomes friends with him. He can talk to her. He seems to understand her more than her friends do. And she feels like it's someone she can actually relate a little bit more to. Someone who knows about magic and all this other things. Raven's able to do this spell that kind of frees him from the book, but not really. He basically gets this sort of mummy body that's made out of the pages of the book. But he can't travel too far away from the book or he'll start falling apart. But at least he can kind of interact with Raven a little bit. And he begins teaching her all these different new spells and new magics. We get a montage of her reading all these magic books. As this is happening, Raven and Malchior are also kind of starting to fall in love a little bit, which is interesting. This is one of the only episodes that is pretty explicit about being about romantic feelings in some way. The only other one we've seen up to this point that explicitly touches on that, other than I guess Beast Boy and Terra do go on a date, so that counts also. But the other one I can think of is Date with Destiny, one of my favorite episodes with Robin and Starfire. But here Raven gets a love interest, which is kind of interesting. Through learning more magic, Raven dons the White Raven outfit, which we've seen a couple times before. This usually indicates just sort of a more powerful version of Raven, and that's the case here. We see that she's sort of more comfortable being crazy powerful, which Raven already is, but it always kind of comes from a more she has to be careful about her powers and more reserved with them because they're also very dangerous. Here she's a little more comfortable being crazy powerful. She also does some stuff that we've never seen her do before. At one point she forces Beast Boy to transform, which I feel is incredibly violating. There's not really an equivalent in the real world for that, but like, I don't know, that feels uncomfy. And we're maybe kind of hinting at here that maybe Raven's new powers are a little darker than the color of her cloak would have you assume. Meanwhile, Cardiac is back doing his thing, being an evil giant robotic heart. So the Titans go to fight him. He's kidnapped this little girl who's like trapped inside this giant robotic heart, and then Raven like fucking attacks him and is like, but in doing so puts this little girl in danger. And I don't know, there's probably some kind of metaphor here with a little girl trapped by a heart and Raven having to break this heart in order to set her free. I don't know. There's probably a metaphor there, but it's going over my head. The Titans are a little concerned for Raven at this point because she very clearly put this little girl in harm's way, and Raven's a little bit concerned as well. She goes back to Malchior and she's like, I think you were teaching me dark magic, like black magic, which is, you know, traditionally bad. And I try to stay away from that stuff.
If one is to understand the great mystery, one must study all its aspects, not just the dogmatic, narrow view of the Jedi.
Which I think is weird because I've always assumed that Raven's powers, like, were dark magic. Her dad is Trigon, who is essentially the devil, and, like, that's where her powers come from. So, like, they're demon powers, right? I don't know. I guess this is a different branch of evil magic that Raven usually avoids, but has been hanging out with this Malchior wizard guy, and he seems to think it's cool. He convinces her that it's not that bad, and he's like, okay, I think we can do the real spell that'll actually set me free from this book. She's like, all right, cool, I'll do that. So she does that, but Spaghetti-O, I feel like I say that every episode. I need a better phrase. Oopsie doopsie. Malchior pulled a fast one on her, and turns out he's actually the dragon, not the wizard. He flipped the names in the book because he was trapped inside the book. That's what the wizard was trying to do back in the story she was reading, and he succeeded. But because the dragon, who was, I guess, magic also, was trapped inside the book, he was able to manipulate the pages of the book, I guess, and just flip the names. And so Raven didn't realize that when she was freeing Malchior, she was freeing Malchior, the dragon, and not the wizard guy, who I guess is just dead or something. At one point they mentioned that this story between the wizard and the dragon happened like 1,000 years ago. I don't know if that's on Earth or some magic dimension. It's not made clear, but it doesn't really matter. Anyways, point is, Raven's got to fight a dragon now, and they do the thing where they both shoot a laser at each other, and then eventually Raven points her wand as hard as she can, and she does that a little bit harder than the dragon, and it ends up defeating him and sealing him back inside the book, and sealing the book away in like a chest or whatever. And it's kind of sad. This is kind of the first like love interest character that Raven's had. And she was trying to do the right thing and trying to be nice, and she got taken advantage of, and that's pretty sad. We also end with a scene with Beast Boy, and he is a bit nicer in this scene, and is like, I'm sorry that dude broke your heart, that sucks. I'm sorry that you felt like you couldn't be yourself around us, is essentially what he is, the gist of what he is saying. He points out that like you don't have to be alone all the time. You do have friends here, and we do care about you and want to spend time with you. You don't have to just seal yourself away from everyone. And Raven is happy to receive this message and even gives Beast Boy a little bit of a hug, which is kind of one of our only more solid hints at there maybe being something between Raven and Beast Boy. This is something the fan base is totally all over, but in the actual show, there are like small hints every now and then. This is one of those. And that's like kind of about it. I like this episode. I don't know if it's the best ever, and I think it gets a little bit muddy in what specifically it's trying to say. I don't know, maybe I just relate a lot to Raven. Throughout this whole episode, she mostly doesn't do anything wrong.
I have done nothing wrong, ever, in my life.
I know this.
Like, yeah, she goes too far with some of the evil magic that she's playing around with. I get that. But for the most part, she's like, I would like to spend some time alone in my room reading a book, please. And her friends are like, hey, what are you up to? Want to hang out? And she's like, no. And they like keep bothering her. And she should be allowed to spend time in her room and read a book every now and then. Like, that's not a huge ask. And yes, Beast Boy and the other Titans realize, like, hey, you know, I should have called you creepy, and, like, you know, we should let you be yourself. But at the same time, it feels like the episode's being like, hey, don't be too introverted, because then you might accidentally summon a magic dragon who'll try to kill you, and that would be bad. Somewhere there's a line between, like, taking time for yourself. If you're introverted, you need time to yourself to, like, recharge so that you can spend time with others. At the same time, there is a line somewhere where, like, hey, maybe you should, you know, go outside and touch grass every once in a while. That's good too. So I don't know if this episode exactly finds that balance with its messaging.
Hello. So, analyzing this episode further, maybe too much, I think that it's actually kind of about predatory relationships, and this could be a bit of a stretch, but I'm thinking I'm right on this one. Even more specifically, it's about, like, catfishing online, and, like, sort of a cautionary tale of that. Raven is this, like, introverted teenage girl who's kind of insecure and doesn't really fit in with her peers and would rather spend time alone by herself than, like, interacting with other people her own age, which kind of makes her a prime target for a older man who turns out to be actually a monster. Like, she basically is in, like, an online chat room with Malchior, and they connect because, one, Raven feels like she can't really relate on the same level to her friends, and at the same time, Malchior's kind of reinforcing that by being like, yeah, I'm the only one who really understands how you truly are, and he's, like, calling her beautiful and stuff. And we also, like, established that he's from, like, 1,000 years ago, so he's, like, way older than he is presenting himself, and then at the same time he's lying about what his name is and who he actually is. He's using a different guy's profile picture, and then turns out he's not a cute twink magic boy, but he's a literal monster. So, like, I think that's what this one is about, which is an interesting way to go about that. I might be a bit of a stretch here, but I think that is definitely an angle of this one. Like a cautionary tale, like sort of a, hey, kids, look out for literal predators who will prey on your social insecurities and also lie to you and try to take advantage of you. Well, I think now most people are kind of aware of those dangers of speaking to people online, because it turns out a lot of people online are not who they say they are. I know, it's shocking. But at this time period, that was still kind of a new concept and still kind of a new danger. So if that's what they're going for, I think it does work, weirdly, which makes, like, the lesson a little bit less like Raven or her friends did anything wrong necessarily, and it's more just like Raven is a victim in this situation that, although is, like, magic based in the show, has, like, a real world counterpart. We're doing metaphors and stuff to, like, represent things that are real world dangers. So again, a show that has a lot more depth when you, like, really overthink it, but it's stuff that's, like, there in the subtext. I don't think I'm that crazy to make this leap. Anyways, that's it.
Anytime we focus on Raven, I think is fun, and we get to see, like, a totally different type of episode where it's, like, more focused on magic and sorcery and dragons and stuff, which I think is fun. One thing I really like about the roster of the specific roster of the Teen Titans is that we kind of get to touch on, like, every possible angle of the DC universe, and we can have, like, an episode where they go to space, or we can have an episode like this where it's all about magic and stuff, or we can have an episode where they're just, like, fighting a villain. And all of it feels like it exists coherently within the same world. And I think that's fun. I like having lots of different things like sci-fi and magic and fantasy all existing within the same thing, because I just feel like it just adds, like, so many possibilities to the types of stories you could tell. You could argue that some of that is, like, contradictory, but I don't care. I think it's fun. In the long run, this isn't, like, the most important episode ever. I think Malchior might have a cameo way later on in the series, but for the most part, This episode is mostly self-contained, but I still think it's a good one. Any episode with Raven in it is one that I'm gonna probably like, so I like this one. Sue me. What do you think? Leave a comment. Should Raven be allowed to be introverted and read a book, or should she go out and touch grass more? I don't know. Thank you so much for watching. That's it for this week, but make sure you subscribe and hit the bell and all that, because we're going through every episode of the original Teen Titans week by week, episode by episode. So we'll see you again next week with another episode. Bye-bye.